Welcome back, guys. Your midnight movie this week is Cobra, 1986, starring Sylvester Stallone and Brigitte Nielsen. Cobra is its peak 80s gritty action. Stallone plays Lieutenant Marion Cobretti, and Brigitte Nielsen plays Ingrid Knudsen, a model in LA. And the two are drawn together when Brigitte, playing Ingrid, is targeted by a sort of murderous cult that seems to be killing people across LA. It's never really explained why they do it. They just kind of do it. But as a result of these psychopaths showing up, and at the beginning, this one psycho is basically taking people hostage at a grocery store, and we see Stallone roll in his resto mod, really almost tanked out 1950 Mercury. Rolls right in with the aviators, with the gun on his hip, leather jacket, looking good in boots, goes in and takes out the trash. This movie is really poorly reviewed on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think it is unfairly maligned. Yes, it's a Golden Globus production, which, for those of you that are familiar with Golden Globus, they were a pair of brothers that produced a lot of films in the 80s for Canon Films. These were not necessarily great films. These guys didn't win any Oscars or get any Oscar nominations, but they did produce films that people wanted, people enjoyed. Actioners, movies that sort of satisfied that desire for a badass good guy taking out the trash, saving people. Delta Force, all those types of films from the 80s that really almost kind of became parodies of themselves in a way. And Cobra goes right up to the line. It stops right before cheese. There's people online that say this movie's totally cheesy and it really leans into every 80s trope. It kind of does, but it's fun. I don't think, you don't go into a movie like Cobra or many films like that of the genre made in the 80s expecting something really deep. I think it satisfies that itch of just a fun action film with the 80s aesthetic. Cobretti lives on right on Venice Beach, so you get nice shots of Venice Beach in the 80s. Interesting shots of the city, like downtown LA, sort of the outskirts of LA. The movie is actually really well shot. The opening has one of the most beautiful shots I think I've ever seen in an action film, or maybe even any 80s film, where you've got this really badass guy. You see his silhouette, him riding his motorcycle, and the sky behind him is totally red, and he's of course blacked out in his silhouette, and you hear this sort of ominous music playing and him riding in, and what do you know, it's one of these psychopaths from this murderous cult that's running around LA targeting women. And it just really sets the tone. That with Sylvester Stallone's look, his cool blue aviators, his leather jacket, his car, his boots. Yes, it is peak 80s. It is tropey as hell, and that's what makes it great. I don't understand these people that have all these criticisms of these films. It's like, if you don't like 80s actioners, don't watch them. But don't be mad at them for being what they are. Do you see what I mean? If you just want to watch, and I think it's a pretty grounded performance by Stallone. I think Stallone is wrongfully derided in a lot of ways. I think he's written off because he did so many Rocky films. He did so many action films. You obviously got the Rambo films, and somehow people try to write him off as less of an actor, and that's not true. I think First Blood was great. I really like Cobra. The Rocky films are fantastic. Copland, holy smokes. You really want to see Stallone flex some incredible acting craft. Copland. But Cobra's just fun. He's not playing an overly tough guy. He plays it really grounded. He doesn't put up with any shit. There's a few gang members in the beginning that give him a bit of a hard time because he's trying to park his car and they won't move. So he just moves them with his car. And so there's that confrontation, and he establishes, respect with these dudes, that he's not going to be walked over. He gets questioned, of course, by his superiors when he maybe steps over the line, but does so in protecting innocent people. This is where sort of those tropes of, you know, um, a guy perceived as maybe stepping over the line or stepping above the law, he doesn't. He's protecting people from psychopaths that are going to murder them, and if he doesn't act, something terrible or worse happens. And so I really like how Stallone plays Cobra. I think if it had been another actor, with less restraint, less instinct of how to play such character, it could have really gone off the rails. And there's never a point where Cobra feels two dimensional ever. I like Brigitte Nielsen in this movie. She doesn't have a ton of dialogue. That's upon the second viewing. Again, I probably hadn't seen this movie since I was a kid, since my parents rented it. I remember watching this as a kid. My parents renting it when I watched this movie last week. It was really vibrant and fun to watch. And then I watched it again the next night. And yeah, Brigitte Nielsen doesn't have a ton of dialogue, and I think she was a newer actress at the time. I believe that she and Stallone were either dating or married at this time. So the relationship, the romance that develops between Ingrid and Cobra feels real. Some of her line delivery, maybe not the best, but I don't think it's anything that's terribly distracting at all. I believe her as this model. I believe her as this woman who's really out of her element and just, really just wondering why is she being targeted. The lead villain is played by Brian Thompson. And if you didn't grow up watching 80s or 90s movies, you might not know who Brian Thompson is. He has a very, very distinct face, almost kind of like a stone face. And he plays the Night Slasher. That's the name of the lead character. And he's this serial killer, but also sort of this leader of this murderous cult of people who kind of show up at underpasses late at night with axes, harming women. And it's believable. There's never a point where you see him and his bloodthirsty henchmen exacting their terrible deeds and you don't believe it. Again, they cast it right. You can kind of tell after I watched it a couple times that maybe some of this narrative was a little thin, but what it doesn't have in narrative, it really does make up for in atmosphere and how it was shot. There's so many different places in LA that I feel like a lot of shooting of LA nowadays is super lazy. It's Santa Monica Beach, Venice Beach, Beverly Hills, parts of the West Side, Hollywood, and that's it. And that's a very small percentage of LA. And this movie, like To Live and Die in LA, does a really good job of choosing locations that aren't stock LA. And I really appreciate that in this movie. It does add to the noirish feel of it. It really does create atmosphere and the threat that Cobra and Ingrid are faced with. There's a really the conclusion is a lot of fun. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a lot going on, and it's what you want from an 80s actioner. You want a big blowout at the end. But again, Cobra, he's not Dutch in Predator. He's not Schwarzenegger in Predator. He knows what he's doing, but he's not invincible. And again, it helps balance out the trope heavy aspect of the film by Stallone playing it a little bit more grounded and all that. But yeah, it's a fun aesthetic, 80s aesthetic, gritty action thriller, and it's worth your time. I think it's it's probably not 100%, but I think it deserves more love than it gets. I think it's like 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think that should be at least in the 80s. If nothing else, just for the fun of this movie. I think that's the thing. Movies, they can be fun. Not every movie has to be a message movie. Not every movie has to have some underlying commentary. You can do that. I like those movies too. But it's okay to just have a fun movie too. And Cobra is just a lot of fun. So currently, I don't believe Cobra is streaming anywhere. I bought it on Apple TV just because, and I'm glad I did. It's just a lot of fun. This is one I'm going to revisit. This is a comfort watch for me for sure, and I highly recommend it. Let me know what you think, though. You know, is it 80s cheese or is it 80s cool? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.